Greetings and welcome back. It's your host, Gabe Morales. First of all, I'd like to say thank you all for your support as we continue to grow this channel and for your respectful feedback in the comments section. Today, I'll be covering Folsom State Prison, which is located just north of the old city of Folsom, California, and is approximately 20 miles northeast of the state capital of Sacramento. Opened in 1880, Folsom is the state's second oldest prison after San Quentin, and the first in the United States to have electricity. Folsom State Prison and California State Prison Sacramento, aka New Folsom, where I worked for 6 years, share the same mailing address of Represa, California, which translates as dam in the Spanish language. I had just been released from an honorable discharge after a 4-year stint with the Marines in the latter part of 1986, when my mother-in-law, who worked at CIM Chino, convinced me to put in an application for CDC. After first rejecting her idea, I put in for it and hired by the department in early 1987. I was assigned to and worked the vast majority of my time at New Folsom, but also worked the tiers of Old Folsom during orientation, and occasionally I was sent to the old side. I will never forget walking into the dark and dreary east gate of Dracula's castle when the door slammed behind me, and I gotta admit, I got a little shaky in my boots. No more just talking about working in prison. This was the big leagues, for real. FSP, Folsom State Prison logo outside of the East Gate is often used in tattoos and drawings as sign that the individual has done time at Old Foley. Folsom has a museum located near the front gate, and I highly recommend anybody stop there for a glimpse back into prison history. It contains several interesting exhibits, and you can purchase souvenirs there. As former Folsom officer, gang squad sergeant, and later Lieutenant Jim Brown notes in his highly recommended book, construction of the facility began in 1857 on the site of the Stony Bar mining camp along the American River. Much of the prison was built by prison labor out of the plentiful granite rock in the area. The prison officially opened in 1880 with a capacity of 1,800 inmates. The first two cell blocks were A and B, completed with 166 cells, which were equipped with heavy iron doors, no lights or running water. Soon C block was added, but it was wired for lights and had 70 cells. That area of the prison was later converted into Dining Room 2, for those of you who have ever worked there or did time there. The prison was long known for its harsh conditions in the decades following the California gold rush. The very first inmate was Chong Hing of Canton, China, who was transferred in from San Quentin. One must remember that there were a lot of Chinese men who were hired as extra labor, and some who mined on their own were arrested and locked up during the California gold rush. Sometimes this was for crimes they clearly committed, but sometimes the circumstances were very shaky, as there were a lot of white claim jumpers back then, and if a Chinaman found gold, they would often find ways to set him up. The Chinese tongs were also very active, not just in San Francisco's Chinatown, but in many Northern California towns, and some individuals were incarcerated due to rival Tong gang violence. Prisoners at Folsom wore the old black and white striped uniforms, often depicted in old prison movie scenes that they wore all across the United States. Some prisoners, especially those considered to be an escape risk, wore a ball and chain. Others wore the organ boot to slow down their movement should they try to escape and make a run for it. If a convict was too unruly, he was tied up in a canvas straitjacket and left in a cell for hours. In the summer, the Folsom area gets very hot, and in the winter very cold, so usually the prisoner came around with a far better attitude pretty quickly. Some prisoners were also tied to rings so that their body would hang above the ground. There were no real rules back then against cruel and unusual punishment, even though that's banned in the Constitution. The courts usually had a hands-off attitude as far as prisons were concerned and would let the wardens run the facilities as they saw fit. In November 1913, the old striped prisoner uniforms were swapped for blue denim jeans and shirts, which was still the dress code when I worked there in the late 1980s and early 90s. I think it's kind of a trip that these even became fashion items as prison blues worn by some individuals who never did time at Folsom Prison. The death house or gallows was located in Building 5 and held condemned inmates awaiting execution. A total of 93 prisoners were hung at Folsom between 1895 and 1937. The prison's first hanging occurred on December 13, 1895, when Chen Hang was hanged by the neck until dead. and the public was invited to witness the execution. In 1932, the death house was moved to Building 2 to make more room for execution witnesses. Gatling guns were mounted in some towers to control prisoners in case of major riots, and I believe one is still shown at the Folsom Museum. I recall one incident when Warden Larkin was taken hostage, and many individuals were killed, including him. Old Folsom Training Facility was named Larkin Hall in his honor. In the old days, some guards carried canes filled with lead, and they had no problem using it on cons if they felt like it. December 2nd, 1911, construction was started on Building 1, which I believe was the biggest or one of the biggest cell blocks in the entire United States. Connected to the prison on a hillside above Folsom Dam is the old burial grounds, known as Boot Hill, which was used between 1880 and 1959 as a burial location for inmates who died during their prison sentence. This was used if a prisoner's family could not afford an outside burial or if they had no known family or relatives. On November 26, 1962, a 16-member visiting Bethel choir had just finished their first hymn at Folsom's Greystone Chapel when three lifers armed with homemade weapons rushed in. These were Eddie Vaughn, Gino Mayer, and Red Fenton. Conrad Becker was a deeply religious convict and a big man. He rose from his seat and with a praise God rushed the attackers, but outnumbered, was stabbed and fell mortally wounded on the ground. Due to Becker's heroic acts, most of the choir had time to escape through the chapel side doors, but 6 members and the prison chaplain were taken hostage by the trio of armed convicts. For 3.5 hours, they negotiated with Folsom Warden Robert Hines and with Richard McGee, then director of the California Department of Corrections. After Eddie Vaughn's brother Zachary pleaded with the trio to negotiate for a surrender, they gave up their weapons and turned themselves over to authorities. As I mentioned in my 2 previous videos, by 1966, La M had taken over the yards at San Quentin, and many were sent to Folsom Prison, where they began to take over the yard there. Sometime around 1968, Joseph Morgan joined the organization. Morgan hated the name Peg Leg. That was a moniker some staff called him because he had a prosthetic leg. After he was shot during a robbery, refused medical treatment, whereby gangrene set in and he lost his leg. While Morgan was not an original member, he was a central figure in the Mexican Mafia for over 3 decades. Per my friend, prison gang expert, and past director overseeing the investigators for the department, while Morgan did not start the MA's relationship with the Aryan Brotherhood, he definitely strengthened it. Folsom Prison, where he was housed for short periods during the 1970s, was often referred to as being Joe Morgan's house. As I showed in previous videos, the MA started at DVI, then some were sent to the Correctional Training Facility, then some sent to San Quentin, which was a Level 4 institution. Folsom Prison was the other main Level 4 institution, and was considered to be the end of the line, or end of the world as some inmates put it. Historically, it was usually older cons that were placed at Folsom Prison, but many of the young prisoners affiliated with La M were not intimidated. One of the individuals who was sent to Folsom after acting out at other facilities was Mike Acha Isom. Acha was also convicted of second-degree murder in a 1971 case where he stabbed an inmate over 50 times in the prison chapel. He allegedly had other inmates sing louder and louder while the inmate was being stabbed, which drowned out his screams. Acha remained a key figure at Folsom for many years and was known as being a good chess player. After hitting and killing convicts for many years and surviving the dangerous walls of Folsom Prison and other joints, Acha was killed in a San Francisco bar in 2001, not long after his parole. Benjamin Topo Peters was Native American, but grew up in the El Hoyo Soto area of the east side of Los Angeles. He was a original MA member, having been inducted while he was in the Youth Authority at DVI in 1957. Topo hung out in Baja California, working for major drug trafficker Harry Buckley out of a Baja Rosarito, Mexico hotel. He was finally captured and extradited from Mexico by Detective Robert Morel in his car trunk. That's a funny story you can read about in Morel's book, The Mexican Mafia. By the way, I also wrote a book about the Mexican Mafia, and many of these stories and pictures are included in that. Eventually, Topo was sent to Folsom Prison, where he took an iconic photo with Joe Morgan, Cheyenne Cadena, and MA founder Huerba Flores, Slim Mike Mulhern, A.B. Hernandez, William Tuffy Castrillo, and Chenano Jordan. Another individual who was shipped out from San Quentin to Folsom after the 1968 shoe war was Robert Robot Salas, the individual who actually kicked off that incident. It is my personal belief that when he was alive, he would have been ranked by most prison gang investigators as being among the top 5 in medals. He was a well-known drug dealer and had connection to guys like the Aryan Brotherhood's Blinky Griffin. Salas paroled from Folsom Prison in 1975 and started staking out some of his old enemies. He was eventually popped on a major dope case and sent to the feds, where he remained very influential. Upon his release, he joined Victory Outreach, as several heavyweights have before him. Boxing matches were a big event at Folsom, which involved gambling by both convicts and guards, placing their bets on the baddest of the bad. Bobby Brimage was sent to Folsom Prison, where he's seen here in the mid-1970s, with his boxing trainers Wayne Bulldog Ladd and Wayne Odom, after a victory bout at the Yards boxing ring. In 1971, Bulldog, along with AB co-founder Jack Red Mahone and other white convicts, as well as 3 Chicanos and 3 blacks, stated that they had been placed in lockdown at Folsom just because they wrote a letter to then director Raymond Procunier and Folsom warden Walter Craven, as well as multiple state legislatures, to protest their poor treatment at the prison. These Folsom inmates also sued the department, but the administration stated that their allegations of retaliation was not the case, and that their placement in isolation was because they were found to be organizing an inmate work stoppage. Bulldog was soon transferred to San Quentin, where he bumped into his old friend Eddie Bunker, and told Ladd that radical lawyer Faye Stander wanted the ABs to form a truce with black convicts and the Mexicans to kill some bulls. Some guards. Stander also communicated frequently with black family leader George Jackson, who soon did help kill some corrections officers, along with Hugo Yogi Pinell, at San Quentin's Adjustment Center, as described in my last video. So that's all I have for part 1. I hope you enjoyed what you heard so far. I'll come back soon for part 2 and relay more interesting stories about Folsom Prison. For now, this is Gabe Morales signing off for Gangsters, Cops, and Politicians.